In this video, we're going to be talking about Warhammer 3's biggest failures. And I know many things can come to mind, such as the rifts or the way it launched, but this video, I'm going to be scoping into Daniel and all about how he could have been the greatest design campaign they ever did. And to break it down, we're going to go through 4 key core concepts as to why I believe this is the case, and also what I think could have been done to make it better. I waited until I had 50 or so hours in Daniel's campaign before I made this video because I wanted to make sure I portrayed the information correctly. First one I want to talk about is tech tree. Let's have a look at a dwarven tech tree where we can obtain things like shield wall, loads of awesome melee stat line bonuses, and just in general a ton of things that will massively bolster the campaign. Let's quickly click the button for Daniel. Yes, that's right, it's in his skill tree. Smiley face. So one of the biggest problems with this is the fact that over a long period of time, Daniel has to force and fight battles to gain the experience, to gain the bonuses for the specific troop. Whereas a tech tree is a thing that happens in the background. You click a button, you gain the bonuses from doing basically nothing. You might have to pay a specific resource for it, but overall you gain very quick bonuses very easily. Here you actually have to fight. And the problem with the experience in the game now is you can level up very, very quickly because of how many fights you've got to do. And so oftentimes you'll be going into some specific bonuses for your troops that you'll be like 20, 30 turns away from getting. So you'll be so much further ahead than the counterpart of the tech tree that it adds actually no value. And so you just start throwing in points into things here just for the sake of it, like maybe for massively into the future. Whereas a normal lord has a ton of really powerful redline tree buffs, so you can buff up the specific units that you care about, and you have like a bunch of different options. To give an example of the Empire, you can see here that we have the +6 for spearmen and all these really insanely juicy buffs that somebody would love to have inside of a campaign. And the main crux of the problem here is that I am the Empire. I'm just recruiting Empire units, and if you can see on the tech tree here, we've got infantry, missiles, and cavalry. This could be the exact same thing that Daniel has, but for Khorne, for Tzeentch, for Nurgle, Slaanesh, etc. Meaning that I can focus on the type of units that I want to buff and not need to use my skill points that should be incredibly precious. And right now, Daniel's in a situation where his campaign's a bit weird. You know, it's nothing like any other campaign, and that could be a really good thing. Everyone else has skill trees. Everyone else has had their tech trees buffed. Everyone else has had their tech trees revamped and re-improved. Well, not everyone. Most factions have. And Daniel's there without a tech tree. Without all of that quality of life integrated into those campaigns, he is now very much lacking. To conclude with the skill points, I believe that Daniel should have each individual unique trees for a Undivided, Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch, and you would basically click into the button like it was up here. But the problem we're going to find is if we go into like a Nurgle tech tree, it should be very similar to this, but very unique to Daniel. I don't believe we should have loads of hard to hit because then we're going to have some complications with his armor. And we're going to go into armor a little bit later on, but I definitely think there'd be a lot of value that you would enable yourself to recruit and click into buttons similar to this, but having it like a bit of a spin. You know, not necessarily maybe spells, but buffing up like the troops as if it's a redline tree, and then some other things in there that like adds a lot of spice to Daniel. Next on the list is no items. For me to figure out that I actually have unlocked items from doing battles, I have to click on a random lord called Itchy Stumps. Obviously, this is just a random dude called Itchy Stumps. It is any lord or any hero or anything like that. You got to click up here to then realize you've obtained loads of pieces of equipment. And it is crazy to me that you might get yourself something like a Talisman of Preservation in the early stages of the game, and that is like game-changing in the early game. That is a lot of fortitude, that is a lot of tankiness, and then Daniel's just there, thumbs up, just like, okay, yeah, no worries. Sorry, buddy, what you need to do is get more devotion, and then you can maybe wear armor that's okay. But on top of that one, you know, the sentient tail, and someone in the comments is going to be proud of me for that one because they said I was butchering pronunciations, but the sentient tail is arguably the best piece of equipment, and you get it from the get-go. The Wings of Pestilence is arguably the best piece of equipment, and you get it from the get-go. And this is sort of like a very strange dynamic in that the Gorefeast helmet as well is arguably one of the best to wear, just from a fighting perspective. A double mortis engine with regeneration. Like, that is crazy good. To give a comparison to the Tail of Many Teeth, which is something you get from Tzeentch quite quickly, and then you go all the way over here, and you can see this one. The difference is 10 armor, or what was it, 5% armor piercing damage. And you're talking about taking 3,000 Tzeentchian glory to get that. and that is your bonus, either 5% armor piercing or 10 armor. Yes, the interchangeability is quite nice in that you can equip either or depending on the scenario that you need, but generally speaking, armor is not that useful. Like in the late game, everyone has armor piercing, so who cares? But, you know, I would expect as you go through the tier, if I'm not allowed to use items, that these items and equipment become insane. Like, this should be so unbelievably powerful. Like, I'm dedicating a lot to Zinj. Zinj should be rewarding me with some pretty cool swag. But my man is just spitting in my face by saying, oh, here's another variant of the same tail, buddy. Have fun with it. So to conclude with the armor and the item situation, I think the flexibility is what makes Daniel's campaign very, very interesting and really awesome, but the quality of life around it is terrible. For example, if I want to get a +2 recruit rank, which I'm going to want to do for if I'm going down the rare in a core, I click equip all in the set, and then now I can't then go back. I would love some form of preset for me to say, oh, let me save this preset as I'm fighting against Empire. Oh, I'm saving this preset, let me fight against the Zinj. Because you'll have like a dynamic of what makes the most sense with equipment that fights against something else. The thing to add as well, the filtering system is terrible in that I can't search for anti-large, I can't search for anti-inventory, and it makes it so that it's very hard to find the pieces of equipment, which is the reason why I feel like filtering and having presets is even more effective. If I'm throwing hands against Festus, and Festus might have, you know, really, really powerful single entity, so I want to build Daniel to be more of a single entity killer, have him really high anti-large, make him very strong in those situations, but I'm going to be faffing around looking at the armor pieces like forever. And it takes so long to go through this and select the pieces that you want. It just gets frustrating, right? Maybe enabling me to leverage maybe a couple of pieces of items. For example, I may have to do some task that enables me to obtain items or give him quest items, which might be something that also you would work towards, because everyone has quest items. Literally every single person in the game has quest items that any legendary lord in the game. Your boy does not. So you could then make it so, oh, I have now done my devotion to the Undivided, so let me do some Undivided quests to give me something like that, or equal for corn. Let me give me some corn, one of the new corn books or something like that. I am alienated from a core mechanic everyone else uses, and I don't think it is the right way of approaching this one in the current implementation. Like I said, the armor flexibility is so good, but the quality of life using it is so bad. Alongside, you know, I have Talisman Preservation that I've just unlocked. I can't use it. It feels so bad. So you need to make sure there's another mechanism that's within that to enable that kind of feeling to go away. Because right now you're punishing me for getting cool items, and that is not a fun feeling. Alongside the armor being very bad, generally speaking, there needs to be some kind of progression. Consider it like an MMO. It is kind of like an MMO, this kind of campaign. You're trying to grind devotion to obtain, you know, pieces for your armor. Like, I'm not going to talk about grinding Ashes of Allah for God knows how many hours, and I've never still gotten it, but still. Next up, I want to talk about Daniel's economy and how terrible it actually is. You can see a normal tier 1 building is making us about 100, and that is it. And obviously, you're going to need to put growth in there or control or something like that, because most of the settlements either A, get very little growth, or B, you need to make sure it doesn't rebel 24/7. And in the scenario where we've got a tier 4, you can see we're making 400 from that, and obviously I believe you'll make another 400 from the money income, which is a reasonable amount of money, which 800. But the main problems all come from the early game. And in the early game, the most effective strategy for you to do is to reduce the cost of your army and then go into one type of army. Like, you can see within my composition, I've got a bit of a hybrid because I'm trying to fight against multiple different things. But you can see that we have the Zinchian units. So obviously, anytime I've got Zinch and I've got Corn, I'm reducing the income of all of these armies. And this is how you bolster your economy in the early stages of the game. Reducing the cost of everything. And that is such a weird and strange way of playing, in that my buildings are making me basically no money. Okay, so what can I do there? Okay, reduce the cost of my army. That is not a good economy. That is just a really lacking mechanic, in that I have very little incentive to keep settlements, because this province is making me 1.2k. That is so unbelievably low for a province, and it's probably more effective for me to just trade these settlements and sell them to people rather than keep them. And that is generally what I did. You know, across any kind of conquering that I was doing, I would sell the settlement for maybe like 5k, and that is way worth it than investing tons of money into the settlement, and then you can keep on snowballing by taking on loads of settlements. And I think this is one of the unfortunate issues that Daniel has. I mean, one thing they did to fix the likes of Norsca was give them tons and tons of income from ports. This could be another way to bolster his economy because of how many port settlements that you're surrounded by. But I feel like it's a plaster fix to the ultimate problem in that you need to have better buildings to increase the income of these settlements. For example, Warriors of Chaos have buildings that increase like by 30%, I believe it is, increase the value of the settlements that you get. And then that is kind of things that would add a lot of value to this topic, because we are effectively in a scenario where you're too poor to invest into your buildings, and your buildings don't give you that much early game. And so you're in a constant feedback loop of, I am too poor. And that is a very terrible feeling for a legendary lord with a unique mechanic. This guy should be using demons to do trade routes or do something. Maybe trade routes is a bit fat, 'cause I don't think he would. But there needs to be some other mechanic in there that helps you. And you got to keep in mind, he's an evil faction. The likelihood of trading with people is so low. And you cannot trade. So, that is just an unfortunate thing that you can't do. I don't know why you can't trade with Daniel, but you're taking away probably half the income you'd probably make in the early stages of the game. Lastly, Demonic absolutely sucks. He is the literal demons of chaos, and you would never find me using any demonic units because they're just so bad in comparison. Anytime I play Daniel, I'm using mortal infantry without fail. I think the only reason you would ever use demonic units over, mortal units is if you don't have the DLC. If you don't have Champions of Chaos, then you're a bit screwed, because every early game goes from Marauders into Chaos Warriors. I'll give you an example. Valkyria can become demonic, and almost nobody will want her to be demonic. Because of the way that leadership functions inside of the game, you can very easily be flanked all around and have a significant reduction in leadership, meaning you're going to start crumbling. That's not to say all demonic units are absolutely garbage. It's just that they're so unbelievably squishy, like a Slayer. You send a Slayer into any kind of infantry, they're going to take a lot of damage no matter what tier it is. It could be tier 1 goblins, it could be whatever. They'll take a lot of damage. And Bloodlords are basically the same. You send them into anything, they will do a lot of damage, but also take a lot of damage because of how squishy they are with their stat line and their armor. And you put that to the example of a Chaos Warriors of Khorne. I mean, this Chaos Warriors of Khorne is an absolute beast. He will fight any tier of infantry and trade incredibly well. That is the fundamental problem that we have here. We're a demon faction where the demon units do not perform better than mortal units. On top of that, demonic units that are very high tier are incredibly unobtainable. This is turn 69. Nice. But we're still nowhere near getting access into tier 5 of the Soul Grinders of Zinj, for example. Yes, we could be using tier 4 around this point, but it takes a very long time to get to the late game, to get to these awesome units that you'd want to be using. Whereas at any other conventional, like Empire, Dwarves, you could get to tier 4, tier 5, like turn 40, turn 50. So you are so much further behind when it comes to compositions. To summarize, I actually really do like the Demons of Chaos faction, and I would love to see an overhaul or rework to enable these changes to happen, to stop him from feeling like such an outsider. For example, the lack of tech tree, like we discussed. The second he gets a tech tree and it's actually more applicable to what you're trying to do, either Zinj, Khorne, Nurgle, etc., the fact that you can't use items, the second you're able to use some items, or changing the way that armor interacts with it, having a better economy, and making demonic units less bad, or providing bonuses to make them better. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this